She said my name like it meant something, slow, deliberate, almost testing how it sounded in the air between us. I was the last one still packing up after class. The rest of the students had already left, their laughter fading down the hallway. But she stayed by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the rain as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "Stay a minute," she said without turning. It wasn't a question. The room was too quiet after that. Just the low hum of the projector cooling down and the soft sound of her heels against the tile when she finally turned around. Dr. Rowan. Everyone else called her intimidating. I never saw that. I saw someone precise, controlled, like every movement was chosen carefully, to hide the tremor underneath. She set her glasses down on the desk. "You've been distracted lately." I started, but the word fell apart halfway out. Her gaze held me there. Not sharp, not unkind, just steady. The kind of look that made you want to explain yourself even if you didn't know what you'd done. "I've noticed your work," she continued. "You write differently than before. It feels—" She stopped, eyes flicking to mine. "Personal." I laughed quietly. "You always said that's what you wanted." That got the smallest smile out of her. The kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. She moved closer, slow, tracing a fingertip along the edge of my essay on her desk. Her nails made a faint sound, paper and skin like static. "Personal doesn't mean dangerous," she said. "I didn't think it was," I said. "Until now." She exhaled, almost a laugh, but softer. A sound that lingered. The rain outside hit the window harder. The air smelled like chalk and coffee and her perfume. Something floral but faint, like it had been put on hours ago and forgotten. When she sat on the corner of the desk, I noticed how close she was. Close enough that I could see the tiny line just above her lip when she pressed them together. Close enough that I didn't trust myself to move. "Do you know why I asked you to stay?" she said. I shook my head. Her eyes dropped for a second, maybe to my hands, maybe just away from mine. "Because I think you're writing about things you don't understand yet." "Then teach me," I said. Too fast. Too honest. She froze, not visibly, but in the smallest way, the way her shoulders straightened and her breath caught before she let it go. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said quietly. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." That landed between us like something alive. Neither of us spoke after that. Just the rain, louder now. Her fingers brushed the essay again, then stopped halfway, close to mine. Not touching, just there. The kind of almost touch that's worse than the real thing. When she finally stood, she moved past me. Close enough that her sleeve brushed my arm. I could feel the warmth through the fabric, brief but impossible to ignore. At the door, she paused, looked back. "Today's lesson," she said, her voice lower now, steadier, "is personal." And then she closed the door behind me. The sound echoed, sharp, final, but I didn't move. I stood there staring at the door, still feeling her presence in the room, like she'd left something behind on purpose. I didn't know yet if I just crossed a line, or if she had. The next week, she didn't look at me once during class. Not once. She lectured with her usual poise, measured tone, perfect posture. But every time her eyes swept across the room, they skipped over me like I wasn't there. I should have been relieved. Instead, I couldn't stop watching her. Her voice, the rhythm of it. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she lost her place in her notes. I tried to keep my focus on the slides, on anything else, but my pen kept stalling mid-sentence. After class, I stayed behind again, pretending to fix something in my bag. The room emptied slowly, chairs scraping, laughter fading down the hallway. Then it was quiet. She gathered her papers without looking up. "If you need something, say it. Don't hover." I almost smiled. "You said last time the lesson was personal." I thought maybe there was more to it. That got her attention. She looked up then, really looked. There was something tired in her eyes. Not from lack of sleep, but from years of holding things in. "Personal doesn't mean inappropriate," she said. I didn't say it did. She sighed, lowering herself into the chair behind her desk. For a moment, she seemed smaller somehow, less the untouchable professor, more a woman sitting in a too-bright room after everyone's gone home. My ex-husband used to say I didn't know when to stop working, she said, almost to herself. He was right. I thought if I just stayed busy enough, I wouldn't notice how quiet the house got. I didn't know what to say. The words that came out weren't smart or planned. You don't seem like someone who likes quiet. That made her smile soft, weary. No, I don't. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was aware. I caught the faint scent of her perfume again, the same as last week. Faint, nearly gone, like she forgot to care if anyone noticed. She leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You're what, 22? 24. That's still too young to be looking at your professor like that. I wasn't. She raised an eyebrow, amused. You were. The air tightened between us. I felt my pulse in my throat. She stood then, slowly, coming around the desk until she was beside me. My breath caught when her hand brushed my shoulder. Light, almost accidental. You remind me of someone I used to be, she said quietly. Her hand lingered for a second too long. I turned my head, and for the first time she didn't look away. There was something fragile in her expression. Not fear, not guilt, just recognition. The kind that says, I see you, and I don't know what to do about it. Outside, thunder rolled, faint but close enough to make the lights flicker. Neither of us moved. Her hand slipped away first. She cleared her throat, stepped back and said, barely above a whisper, You should go before the storm starts. But when I reached the door, I could still feel the warmth of her touch, and somehow I knew she could too. The rain had followed me again. By the time I reached her office, my jacket was soaked through, and the hallway smelled faintly of wet paper and old coffee. Her door was half open, the same way it had been that first afternoon, and I could hear her typing inside. I knocked lightly. Come in, she said, not looking up. When she finally did, her eyes softened for a second before she caught herself. You shouldn't be here during office hours unless it's academic. I needed to ask about the midterm. You've already turned it in. I know. Her lips pressed together. I thought she'd tell me to leave, but instead she leaned back in her chair, studying me. The rain drummed against the windows. You think I don't notice, she said quietly. The way you look at me. I froze. You told me not to lie in your class. Her smile was small. That was a mistake. The air between us thickened. She stood up, walked around the desk, and stopped a step too close. I could smell her perfume. Faint again, like it only lived in the air between us. You can't stay here, she said, but she didn't move away. I nodded, but my feet stayed planted. Her hand brushed my arm as she reached for a folder behind me, and that tiny touch felt louder than the rain outside. I almost said something reckless, but a sharp knock on the door froze us both. Dr. Rowan? It was another professor. The voice muffled through the door. Do you have a moment? She flinched, then glanced at me wide-eyed. Go, she mouthed. I hesitated, the adrenaline making my pulse feel too loud, too visible. But she pushed the folder into my hands, whispering, Use the back exit. The knock came again, louder this time. By the time the other professor stepped in, I was halfway down the narrow back hall. I heard her voice behind the closed door, calm, professional, like nothing had happened. But something had. I waited at the end of the hall, heartbeat still unsteady. A few minutes later, she appeared, her expression unreadable. That was close, she said softly. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't, she said, though her hands trembled as she adjusted her sleeves. But we can't keep. She stopped, the sentence collapsing in on itself. Can't keep what? She met my eyes, and for a long moment, she didn't answer. The storm outside cracked hard enough to shake the windows. Her hand reached out instinctively, fingers grazing my wrist, just enough to steady herself, or maybe to stop me from leaving. We both froze there, close enough that I could feel her breath against my skin. Close enough that, if one of us leaned even slightly forward, she stepped back first. Her voice barely a whisper. You should go. but her eyes said the opposite. Neither of us moved until the thunder faded, leaving only the sound of the rain. Steady, relentless, between us.it happened on a Thursday, the kind of cold, gray afternoon that made the whole campus feel smaller. She'd asked me to help carry boxes from the storage room to her office. Just papers, she said. Nothing important. But we both knew what that meant by now, an excuse wrapped in formality. The room was dim, the only light coming from the window behind her desk. Dust drifted in slow spirals through the air. She set one of the boxes down, brushed her hands off and said quietly, "You shouldn't keep showing up like this. I don't know how to stop." She froze. Her hands tightened around the edge of the desk. "You can't say things like that. It's the truth." Her breath caught, and for a second she looked younger. Not in years, but in hesitation. Like someone who hadn't been looked at like this in a long time. "Do you have any idea what this could do to me?" she said. Her voice trembled, but only slightly. "To you?" "Yes," I said. And I still came. The space between us shrank with every heartbeat. She turned her face away, but I could see her reflection in the window, the way her chest rose and fell, the small tremor in her jaw. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't look at me like that. Then stop standing so close." That made her laugh, quiet, unsteady. She turned to face me again. "You think this is easy for me? That I don't?" She stopped herself, biting her lip hard enough to leave a mark. I stepped closer before I could think better of it. "Then say it." Her silence was an answer. The air between us changed, denser, charged. My hand lifted, almost of its own accord, brushing a loose strand of hair away from her face. She didn't pull back. Her eyes closed for a moment, as if she'd forgotten how to breathe. "You shouldn't," she whispered, but her voice had lost its conviction. "I know." She leaned slightly into my touch, barely there, but enough that I felt the warmth of her skin against my fingers. My heart was a hammer in my chest. Then she exhaled, shaky, broken. "You're too young to ruin yourself on someone like me. Then don't let me." Something flickered in her expression. Anger, maybe, or surrender. Her hand came up to my chest, not to push me away but to hold me there, as if she needed proof that I was real. "This can't happen," she said, though her palm stayed pressed against me. "I know," I said again, softer this time. Her fingers curled against my shirt. The smell of rain was still on my jacket, mixing with the faint scent of her perfume. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. The rules, the risks, the years, and then a sharp buzz from her phone. She flinched, stepping back as the spell broke. The screen lit her face in cold light. She didn't answer it. Neither of us spoke. The distance between us was barely a breath, but it felt like a cliff. Her eyes lifted to mine, wide, raw, and she said, barely audible, "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." And I didn't. The next day she canceled class. No explanation, just a short email sent at 6:42 a.m. I read it 3 times, staring at the single line. Lecture postponed. Personal matter. By noon, I was standing outside her office door again. The hallway was quiet, every sound amplified. Footsteps, the hum of the lights, my heartbeat. I knew I shouldn't be there, but something felt unfinished. When she finally opened the door, her expression flickered between surprise and something like resignation. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to," I said. She stepped aside, letting me in without a word. The blinds were half drawn, casting thin lines of sunlight across the floor. Her phone lay on the desk, screen cracked, as if it had been thrown or dropped in a hurry. She sat down, rubbing her temple. "Someone saw us yesterday." The words landed like a punch. I didn't move. "Who?" "One of the faculty from next door. She mentioned it this morning. Said she thought we looked close." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. She said it in that way people do when they're pretending it's not gossip. The silence between us tightened. "I'm sorry," I said. Her eyes lifted to mine. "You keep saying that." She stood, moving to the window, arms crossed. "You think this is just about my job, but it's not. It's about what happens when people start to talk. I worked too hard to have whispers ruin what's left of my reputation. I took a step closer. Then tell me to stop coming. Tell me you don't want this. She turned, too fast, and her hand hit the desk, scattering a few papers to the floor. Don't you get it? I can't say that. The words hung there. Honest. She looked down, shaking her head like she wanted to take it back, but couldn't. I told myself it was just attention, that it would pass. But it doesn't. The way she said it, quiet, almost ashamed, made my throat tighten. I closed the distance between us. Then what do we do? She didn't answer. Her hand brushed the papers on the floor, then mine accidentally, and neither of us pulled away. Her fingers trembled. I didn't plan for any of this, she whispered. You're supposed to be the one with choices. I already made mine years ago. I swallowed hard. Maybe you can make another one. She looked up then, eyes glassy, mouth parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the hall. We froze. Her hand stayed against mine. The footsteps faded. When it was quiet again, she drew in a sharp breath and said, "If anyone asks, you were never here." Then she stepped past me, close enough that her shoulder brushed my chest, leaving a trail of warmth as she went for the door. Before opening it, she stopped and said, voice low but steady, "Meet me tomorrow, after hours. No one else." And just like that, she was gone, leaving the air charged and the decision already made. The building was nearly empty when I arrived. Most of the lights in the hallway were off, only the faint hum of the vending machine and the distant drip of a leaky pipe filling the silence. Her office door was closed, the window dark. I hesitated before knocking, my pulse steady but heavy, the kind of rhythm you feel in your throat. She opened the door almost instantly, like she'd been waiting. "Come in," she said quietly. The room smelled faintly of rain again, or maybe it was just the way the air thickened when we were in the same space. She'd changed from her usual work clothes. Her sleeves were rolled up, her hair tied loosely, a few strands falling against her neck. She looked tired, but not defeated, like someone who'd been arguing with herself all day and finally stopped pretending to win. "I shouldn't have asked you here," she said, closing the door behind me. "But I couldn't stop thinking about yesterday." Neither could I. We stood there, close enough that I could see the small tremor in her hands, the way her thumb traced over the inside of her palm, a nervous habit. "This isn't right," she said, voice unsteady. "I know." She looked up at me, her eyes searching for something. Reason, maybe, or restraint. "You're too young to understand what this costs. I understand enough to know what it's worth." That broke her composure. She laughed, short, disbelieving, then covered her mouth with one hand. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," I said. "But it's real." Something shifted in her face then, the kind of quiet surrender that doesn't need words. She stepped closer, slow but certain, until the space between us disappeared into shared breath. "Tell me to stop," she whispered. "I can't." Her eyes fluttered shut for a moment, and when they opened again, the fear was still there, but softer, almost gentle. I reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and my hand lingered longer than it should have. She leaned into the touch, just slightly, enough that I felt the warmth of her skin beneath my fingertips. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Then she exhaled, a sound that was half sigh, half surrender, and rested her forehead against mine. "This isn't how I wanted it to happen," she said. "Then how did you want it?" She smiled faintly, without the guilt, without the years between us. We stood there, breathing the same air, the distance between us measured in half-thoughts and half-decisions. The world outside could have fallen apart, and I wouldn't have noticed. Her hand came up, resting on my chest, not pulling me closer, not pushing me away, just there. "This ends here," she whispered, "before we make it worse." But her thumb kept tracing the line of my collarbone, soft and slow. And then, finally, she looked up, met my eyes and said, almost too quietly to hear, "I see you." It was both a confession and a goodbye. She stepped back. I didn't stop her. For the first time, it felt like we both understood. Not what we wanted, but what it had already cost. The semester ended quietly, no announcements, no last goodbyes. Grades were posted online, her name at the bottom of the email like any other. I told myself that was it, that everything between us would fade with the semester. But the truth didn't dissolve that easily. It lingered in small things, the smell of her perfume on old papers, the sound of her voice whenever I read my notes aloud. Weeks passed before I saw her again. It was late, campus nearly empty, when I caught sight of her sitting alone on the bench near the faculty garden. A warm evening this time, no rain. She looked up when I approached, a small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. "I thought you'd be long gone by now," she said. "I tried." She laughed softly. "And I didn't do a very good job." Silence followed, but not the uneasy kind. Just the kind that lets the air breathe between two people who've already said too much. The sky was dimming, the last orange light sliding off the windows behind us. "You were right," she said finally. "About me. About how quiet feels worse when someone finally notices." I sat beside her, close enough that our shoulders brushed. "I didn't mean to make things harder." She shook her head. "You didn't. You just reminded me I'm still allowed to feel something, even if it's complicated." The wind caught her hair, and she reached up to tuck it behind her ear. Without thinking, I helped, fingers grazing her cheek. She didn't flinch this time. "You look different," I said. "So do you." We both smiled at that, faintly embarrassed. She turned toward me, eyes soft, the last of the sunset reflected in them. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "No," I said. "Do you?" She thought for a long time before answering. "No, but I regret how much I tried not to." Something in me eased at that, like the space between us had finally found its right shape. She reached for my hand then, slowly, deliberately. Our fingers intertwined without hesitation. Not a stolen touch this time, just quiet, open, real. We sat like that for a while, the world shrinking to shared warmth and breath. There was no need to fill the silence. "I used to think being seen meant being judged," she said softly. "But with you, it never felt like that." I squeezed her hand. "It never was." Her head tilted toward mine, and I met her halfway. Not a desperate kiss, just the light press of her forehead against mine. A pause that felt like peace. No more secrets. No more pretending it didn't happen. Just two people, flawed and human, finding stillness after everything that almost was. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "Maybe this isn't the ending we expected. Maybe it's the one we needed," I said. She smiled, tired, honest, beautiful. And for once, neither of us looked away. "Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?"